Discover the sinister secrets of my haunted night shift, 10 spine-chilling rules revealed. Jessica gripped the counter, her heart racing in her chest. This was not just another night at the convenience store, not with the flickering lights and unsettling creaks echoing off the cracked walls. The buzzing neon outside cast an eerie glow, but inside, it felt like the store was breathing, and it infinitely terrified her. It was supposed to be just another shift, a simple way to make ends meet, but lately, the mundane routine had twisted into something darker. It started with the whispers. Those faint sounds that dripped from the ceilings when the store was empty. At first, Jessica thought she was imagining things, fueled by exhaustion and the endless grind. But soon, she couldn't deny it. The shadows in the corners seemed to lean in closer, and the old shelves rattled without a soul nearby. She locked the door behind her that night, convinced it was only the wind. But even the wind sounded like a warning now. Each night blurred into the next, she barely noticed the familiar faces of her regulars. The elderly man who bought beer, his eyes hollow and intense, had begun to linger too long, his breath hot against the cool air. Then there was the anxious woman, scanning the aisles for something that wasn't there, her hand trembling over her strange assortment of odd groceries. Something felt off, and the atmosphere thickened, heavy with unspoken secrets. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jessica heard a loud crash from the back room, sending a cold shiver down her spine. She clutched the broom, her makeshift weapon, and held her breath. What could be lurking in the shadows? The hairs on her arms prickled as she moved cautiously towards the back. A trail of photographs pinned to the wall caught her eye. Faces smiled back at her, but they weren't happy, they were pleading. Missing people from the town, their photos layered over shelves full of Doritos and beef jerky like some horrific vision she couldn't escape. Her heart stopped when she realized one of those faces belonged to the elderly man who frequented her store. The room felt suffocating, walls closing in around her as confusion mingled with terror. Just then, she caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of her eye. The man stepped into the dim light, his expression darkening. The flickering bulbs seemed to paint his face more sinister with every flash. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Jessica backed away, panic welling inside her like a storm ready to break. "Where are the others?" he rasped, his voice like gravel. Chills raced through her. She could feel it, the store, the people. It was all some twisted game, and she was in the final round without a clue. As he advanced, the world around her blurred, leaving only the haunting question, would she become just another forgotten name on the wall? The lights flickered violently, plunging her into darkness for a heartbeat, making her gasp. It was all too surreal. What was hidden behind the facade of Maplewood Heights? What other horrors awaited her in the shadows? The darkness was a void, a stifling blanket that wrapped around Jessica, crushing her resolve. The flickering light returned, revealing the man's unholy grin. Her breath quickened as she felt the velvet shroud of fear tighten around her throat. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, yet her feet were glued to the floor, paralyzed by the weight of dread. "What do you want?" she croaked, her voice barely a whisper as she forced herself to take a step back. The wooden floor creaked under her weight, amplifying the tension that hung in the air like a noose. "Don't you see? You belong with us," he said, his voice slithering through the air, wrapping around her mind. "You can't escape what's been started." Startled, she glanced at the photos again. Each face seemed alive, eyes pleading for escape or delivering a warning, perhaps even a promise of her fate. Panic swirled in her stomach, the world spun as she tried to make sense of his words. The flicker of the fluorescent bulbs intensified, strobing in time with her pounding heart. The old man shifted closer, each step slow and deliberate like a hunter cornering prey. She raised the broom defensively, her hands trembling. "Stay back." He paused, but not out of fear. Instead, his smile widened, stretching across his face like a grotesque mask. "You don't understand, do you? We're waiting for you." Jessica turned to run, adrenaline propelling her forward. She raced past the aisles, dodging the shadows as if they were alive, hungry for her. Her breath came in short gasps, the heavy door of the store looming ahead like a beacon, her only escape. She plowed through the registers, desperately reaching for the door handle while glancing back to see if he followed. "Leave this place!" shouted a voice from the darkness, a familiar voice, one of the regular customers. It was the anxious woman from earlier, standing by the backroom doorway, her eyes wild and pleading. "You can't let him get you. Help me!" Jessica cried, but the door wouldn't budge. It felt like it was fused to the frame, locking her fate inside this living tomb. Terror blinded her, and she yanked at the handle, fear coursing through her veins. "No! You have to uncover the truth!" the woman yelled, stepping closer to her. "It's all connected," the whispers, the shadows, the missing. Something in her words struck Jessica, a flicker of clarity piercing through her panic. "What do you mean?" The old man's laughter echoed behind her, thick with malice, drowning out the woman's urgent voice. "There's no truth left, dear. Only the fate that awaits you." With a final, desperate shove, Jessica pushed against the door and stumbled out into the cold night air. Her chest heaved with exertion, but they weren't just shadows anymore. The figures moved like tendrils, creeping closer, coiling around her in the thin mist that had engulfed the store. "Jessica!" the woman shouted again, now at the threshold, "Find the journal. The answers are inside." No time to ask, no time to think, both fear and urgency propelled her feet forward. But was the store still staring back at her? The streetlights glared like hungry eyes, urging her to turn around. The silhouette of the old man loomed in the doorway, shrouded in darkness, the grin never faltering. "You can't escape what you don't remember." As she raced down the sidewalk, every shadow felt alive. Every whisper in the wind held a promise of doom. Was finding the journal her way out? Or was it another trap? What was the truth she needed to uncover? As the fog thickened around her, it became clear this night was only the beginning. The shadows weren't done with her yet. The chill in the air gnawed at Jessica as she ran, her breath fogging briefly before dissipating into the night. She had to find that journal. The woman's warning echoed in her mind, mixing with the sinister laughter of the old man. What truth could possibly save her from whatever he was? The streets were empty, a haunting silence punctuated only by her panting breaths and the rhythmic thud of her heart. She glanced back frequently, half expecting to see the old man stalking her through the fog. Panic surged whenever she saw nothing, amplifying her fear of the unknown lurking just beyond her line of sight. In her desperation, she ducked into a narrow alley, the shadows wrapping around her like a confining cloak. The smell of damp and decay permeated the air. She leaned against the brick wall, trying to steady her racing heart. Should she call for help? But who was left to help her? The woman? The ghostly customers crowded in her mind, faces frozen in terror, begging for release. Ahead, a flickering glow caught her attention, a dim light seeping from a crack below a door at the far end of the alley. Hope dusted her fear, but apprehension lingered. Was she walking into another trap? As she approached, each step felt soaked in trepidation. She could hear soft murmurs, indistinct voices weaving through the night, scratching at the edges of her sanity. A feeling of wrongness washed over her, making her skin crawl. But the urge to uncover the truth propelled her closer. She reached the door and hesitated, her heartbeat loud in her ears. With trembling fingers, she pushed the door open. It creaked with a heavy, foreboding groan, revealing a narrow room filled with dust-covered shelves and a small, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. The smell of aging paper and mildew assaulted her senses. There, at the center of it all, lay the journal. Its spine cracked slightly under the weight of secrets. A strange warmth radiated from it, drawing her nearer. As she flipped open the first few pages, the words blurred before her eyes, and she felt a suffocating heaviness in the air. Each line seemed to pulse with energy, snapshots of a history she was not prepared to face. The sacrifices, the darkness, each name written in blood, the phrases twisted in her mind like a malicious snake ready to strike, and her heart dropped when she recognized a name, her own, scrawled amid the others. No, 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 she gasped, panic tearing through her as the shadows stirred restlessly around her. Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed, echoing her name. Her pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out the reality closing in around her. She bolted upright, desperate to flee, but the door swung shut with a resounding bang. The shadows swirled, forming figures that writhed with unseen rage. "Welcome back, Jessica," a voice crooned from the darkness, smooth yet dripping with malice. "You found what you were looking for, but can you handle the truth?" Her heart leaped into her throat as the room spun, barriers closing in, suffocating her with the weight of foreboding. The journal slipped from her fingers, thumping against the floor and landing open. Pages turned rapidly, almost of their own accord, revealing illustrations that shouldn't exist, creatures lurking behind familiar faces, and all of them were connected to her. Could she uncover the truth and survive? Or was she too late already? The shadows danced eagerly in the corners of her vision, whispering promises of despair, and the only question left was, what would she sacrifice to escape the nightmare she had unearthed? The air thickened around Jessica, clinging to her skin like a damp blanket. The shadows stirred closer, whispering insidious thoughts that twisted her mind. She stumbled back, desperate to find her bearings, but the weight of the journal's revelations pressed down on her, smothering any hope of clarity. "Can you handle the truth?" the voice taunted again, each syllable laced with contempt. Jessica's breath came in rapid gasps as she fought the panic clawing at her chest. This wasn't just a nightmare, it was a living, breathing horror wrapped in flesh and shadow. She scrambled towards the door, but it remained unyielding, a solid wall of despair. "Let me out." She pounded her fists against the wood, the sound echoing in the void as a laughter erupted from the abyss, a cruel symphony that filled her with dread. Was that laughter coming from her own lips? Something flickered in the corner of her eye. She hesitated, then turned her head. The shadows weren't just dancing, they were forming shapes, horrifying figures of distorted faces, mouths stretched in silent screams. In an instant, she remembered the old man's chilling laughter outside the shop, the way it wormed into her mind and thrived. Was he somehow here, feeding off her terror? "Your name is woven into the fabric of fate, Jessica," the voice continued, now circling around her in a menacing rhythm. "You are part of this tapestry, this predestined cycle of despair." A sudden urge, a pull, began to draw her toward the journal again. Slowly, she stepped back, her heart thundering as she reached for it. The pages flared to life, illustrations vivid and jarring, revealing scenes of others like her, trapped, marked, their desperate eyes filled with knowledge too terrible to bear. In one image, she saw herself, standing in the very same alley, face twisted in terror, watching as ghostly hands emerged from the shadows, grasping at her. This is what you'll become," the voice hissed, each word dripping with wicked pleasure. "Are you ready to embrace your legacy?" Jessica shook her head violently, the sensation of dread wrapping tightly around her throat. She wouldn't be another name. There had to be a way out. Mustering every ounce of courage, she spun to the door again, heart hammering wildly as she bellowed, "Let me leave. I want to be part of your story." The laughter stopped, a disturbing silence replacing it, thick and suffocating. Then, a low murmur rose, almost like a chant. "The chosen one, the one who escapes." With renewed desperation, she slammed against the door with her full weight, and for a fleeting moment, she felt it shift. The shadows recoiled, as if taken aback by her resolve. Seizing the chance, she pushed harder, the door groaning under her efforts. "You think you can escape?" The voice was quieter now, almost a whisper, but the malice still gleamed like a knife's edge. You'll return, they always do. The cycle is unbreakable. The door jolted open suddenly, and Jessica stumbled out, collapsing onto the cold, wet pavement. It was night again, the same eerie silence wrapped around her, but then something caught her eye. Gray smoke curled in the air, coiling toward the sky like tendrils of darkness. Her heart raced as she turned back, the door now gone, replaced by a solid wall of brick. Had she truly escaped? Or was this just another layer of the nightmare unfurling before her? The laughter rang in her ears, more furious now, echoing her own fear back to her. Fumbling to her feet, she took off again, the journal's words still burning in her mind. Her fate was sealed unless she could find a way to sever that bond. But the shadows were out there, lurking, waiting for her to falter. Would she discover the truth, or would the truth consume her? She glanced behind, half convinced that the darkness was closing in once more. A flicker of movement caught her attention from a nearby alley. With trepidation, she approached, breath held tight. What more awaited her in the depths of the night? Jessica's heart pounded like a drum in a circus tent. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever waited in the alley was a part of her unraveling reality, a manifestation of the darkness teetering on the edge of her sanity. The alley was cloaked in gloom, shadows dripping like ink from the walls. A strange noise pulled her further in, a soft scraping against the ground, almost like a whispering breath, coaxing her closer. Just look, it seemed to say, beckoning with a confidence she couldn't resist. Stay alert, she whispered to herself, but the air hummed with the wrongness of it all. Jessica crept forward, her pulse echoing in her ears louder than any street noise. The darkness thickened, wrapping around her like a serpent, constricting and threatening. There, a figure slowly emerged, a hunched silhouette. Jessica squinted, her mind racing through all the horror stories she had heard, the faces of the doomed flashing before her. But this shape was different, flickering as if caught between two worlds. "Help me," it croaked, a voice dry as autumn leaves. Was this a trick? She could hear the old man's laughter in the back of her mind. "Don't trust them, it's a trap." "Who are you?" she demanded, forcing herself to inch closer, though every instinct screamed to turn and run. "Someone like you," it replied, the words strained, desperate. Its voice twisted like a rusty nail. "They took my name, my story, I'm trapped here forever." The urgency in its tone ignited something inside her, a flicker of empathy. "What do you mean? How can you escape?" "It's in the journal," the shadow wheezed, and with a sudden flick of a skeletal hand, it beckoned to an object partially buried in the murky ground. A familiar leather cover gleamed under the dim light. The same journal that had tormented her. A chill skittered down her spine. "You want me to trade places?" "No." It hissed, its form swaying. "You don't understand. You can break the cycle, you must read it again. But know this, there's a price." The shadows around them shifted violently, a swirling tempest of emotion. Each flicker held the promise of nightmare. "What do you want from me?" Jessica trembled, feeling the ground beneath her start to pulse a warning. The figure leaned closer, its breath rasping like dead leaves in the wind. "You must give something of yourself in exchange for the truth." Jessica's stomach dropped. Give something? She thought of the horror of becoming another name etched in the fabric of that cursed journal. Did she dare to risk her soul for the chance to free herself? Suddenly, a crashing sound rippled through the alley, shattering the tense moment. Shadows bolted back like startled animals, revealing a dozen hastily formed shapes lurking at the edges of the darkness, their eyes glinting with malicious intent. "They're coming!" the figure gasped. "You have to choose. Quickly. Will you enter the journal and fight, or will you face the night?" Fear melded with urgency as the shadows surged forward, their whispers rising to a fevered pitch. Jessica's mind raced, her throat dry with panic. She could feel the suffocating weight of their hatred, wrapping tighter with every second. Choose or be consumed. The figure shrieked before it dissolved back into shadows, leaving only the beckoning journal in its wake. A primal scream tore from her lips as she staggered backward, the darkness edging closer, hungry and relentless. What do I do? With shadows swirling around her like a storm, Jessica realized she had but a moment to decide. Was there any hope left? It all hinged on a single choice. Would she dare to leap into the unknown or remain and face an unending fate? As she hesitated, dread creeping in deeper, the shadows whispered her answer, their voices weaving a wild, sinister promise into the air. What fate awaited her beyond the pages? The shadows writhed hungrily, and time stretched like an elastic band ready to snap. Jessica could feel their cold malice brushing against her skin, electrifying her senses. She spiraled into chaos, each heartbeat hammering in her chest, a ticking clock counting down to a fate she couldn't fathom. She grasped the journal tightly, its leather surface slick beneath her clammy palm. Panic flared as she envisioned becoming like the figure bound to the tale of terror, a name lost to eternity. Every instinct screamed to flee, but what awaited her outside? She could practically taste the darkness closing in, wrapping its noxious fingers around her throat. Fight or flight, Jessica mumbled, her breath hitching. The journal pulsed in her hands, as if alive, each pulse syncing with the beating of her heart. With a choking gasp, she remembered her mother's old stories about the monsters lurking just out of sight, the tales meant to scare children into obedience. They always ended with a warning. Face your fear or it will consume you. So simple, yet so profound. Could she truly fight back? Could she summon strength from the depths of despair? Swallowing her doubt, she tore her gaze from the approaching shadows and opened the journal. The pages fluttered, an invitation to plunge into its depths, a doorway and a trap all at once. A rush of wind erupted as shadows coiled closer, a terrifying dance of limbs and eyes that thirsted for her. Do it! They chanted, their whispers weaving through the air like vines choking the light. Jessica inhaled sharply, adrenaline flooding her veins. She needed to know what lay behind those cursed words. She stepped into the pages, the ink swirling around her, darker than night. A sensation of falling gripped her midsection, twisting her stomach, pulling her into another realm entirely, where reality and fiction blurred like charcoal sketched on wet paper. She landed hard, a jarring impact shaking her senses. Lifting her head, she was no longer in the alley. Instead, she stood in a dimly lit room, a dilapidated library with dusty, towering shelves concealing desperate stories, much like the one she had just dodged. Shadows shifted between the shelves, breathing life into the fictional horrors she had once dismissed. Jessica's mind raced. Each title whispered to her stories that had lured victims, cursed souls leaving a trail of despair. She felt the weight of their lost hopes pressing down on her. If she was to fight, she needed to unravel the truths they concealed. Welcome to Memories Untold, a voice purred, gliding from one of the shadowed corners. Jessica turned, her breath catching as she focused on a figure, not unlike the one who had beckoned her in the alley, hungry eyes glittering with a twisted kind of glee. You've chosen wisely, the figure continued, slinking closer. But know this, you can't just read, you must embody their fears. Only then can you confront the entity that binds us. Jessica stood frozen. Fight fear with fear? The shadows loomed closer, a sense of urgency brewing in the depths of her chest. What do you want from me? She asked, instinctively stepping back. There's always a price, the figure hissed, revealing rows of jagged teeth, gleaming under the library's flickering light. You must make a sacrifice. Only one can exit. Panic surged within her. The stakes had just escalated. The journal had promised to reveal secrets but demanded her very essence as payment. Which part of her could she afford to give? As she wrestled with her choices, the walls of the library began to close in, shadows thickening, suffocating her. Jessica could almost hear the whispers of the lost souls, intoning her name, beckoning her deeper into their darkness. Could she unravel the mystery without losing herself? Would she find the truth among their fears or be consumed whole? A heartbeat later, the library began to tremble, and the voices grew louder. Jessica sensed the pressing urgency. The choice remained: dive deeper into the sinister narratives and claim the power, or risk everything and escape into the night filled with darkness. Make your choice, Jessica, before it's too late. The shadows whispered, swirling faster around her, bearing down with a frenzy. The echoes of a chilling truth hung thick in the air. Where would her choice lead her next? The shadows twisted frantically, their howls growing deafening. Jessica's heart raced as she grasped the journal tighter, the worn leather seeming to pulse with a life of its own. Every passing second felt like an eternity, a stark reminder that the choice was upon her. Embark on their fears, the figure urged, its voice coiling around her like smoke. It stepped out from the shadows, revealing a gaunt face with hollow cheeks, eyes that gleamed with malice and anticipation. Or remain trapped in this realm forever. Fear clawed at her throat, but something deeper flickered in the pit of her stomach. The air thickened, buzzing with an unknown energy. Her instincts propelled her forward. She needed to confront this dark history, to pull the threads of the tales that curled around her, lest they tighten the noose further. Memories of her past, her mother's tales, late-night telling squeezing through rickety floorboards flooded her mind. If she could delve into these pages, maybe she could wrest the truth from the very jaws of horror. With trembling hands, Jessica took a step toward the nearest shelf, the titles beckoning her. "What do you fear?" she whispered, almost to herself. The journal replied with a soft rustle, pages flipping wildly, as if eager to show her something vital. "Fear," the figure echoed, "is merely a reflection, an echo of what has been and what could be." She inhaled sharply and grasped a volume at random. Its spine cracked, its pages slightly yellowed. The title read "The Wretched Soul of Willow Creek." With a pulse in her chest, she opened the tome. As she read, a vivid scene exploded in her mind. It was dark, a village cloaked in fog. A frantic girl raced through the streets, heart thundering. Shadows loomed, clawing at her heels. Jessica could feel every ounce of terror and all-consuming dread that squeezed her lungs. "Run, run!" the girl cried, her voice an echo through Jessica's mind, rooted in her own specters of anxiety and despair. She could see the figure behind her, memories distorted and menacing, an executioner shrouded in black, wielding a wicked blade. Suddenly, Jessica realized something: the girl had nowhere to hide. She was lost in a loop, fed by her own terror until all that remained was a hollow shell. No! No, not like this! Jessica screamed through the pages, a visceral instinct to fight surging within her. The shadows screeched as if caught in her revelation. "You understand nothing," the figure hissed, its voice trembling with fury. "Your struggle only feeds the cycle. You can't escape this. Learn what you must lose." Jessica's heart raced. The gallery of stories was not for mere reading. Each soul was inextricably linked to its tale, cursed to repeat its fate unless someone like her could break the cycle. But how? Sacrifice her own fear, or perhaps confront her own darkness lurking deep inside? She felt the pressure around her tighten, like a vice squeezing her thoughts. "I am not afraid," she cried, believing her words as the shadows vibrated with disdain. But she knew better. Could fear truly be extinguished? Or was this simply a way to accept her demise? The idea chilled her bones. She glanced around, other stories, other fates closing in. Had every other soul made the same plea? Jessica felt cold sweat prickling her brow. The voices of the damned grew louder, each one clawing at her resolve. "Join us!" they shouted in a cacophony of despair. They echoed her mother's warning, a mantra of dread simmering beneath the surface. She needed clarity. She had to resist their lure and unravel the truth hidden in the shadows. The journal would reveal more. She turned to another title, the cover simple yet foreboding, "The Price of Fear." Each heartbeat melded into the next, urgency mingling with fear. As she turned the pages, each word etched deeper into her psyche, revealing fleeting glimpses of lost hope, twisted sacrifices, and the chilling faces of those who had surrendered. Would she fracture beneath the weight of their despair, or find a thread of light to pull herself from the darkness enveloping her? A crack echoed through the library as the shelves began to shake. Would she find her truth, or was she destined to vanish among them? The ground trembled beneath her feet, shadows swirling rapidly, pulling her further into the abyss. Would she discover the sinister truth, or be embraced by the very darkness she sought to conquer? Choose, Jessica. Embrace or escape. The voice shrieked again, rising above the howls. Her choice loomed closer now. Jessica's fingers trembled over the cracked spine of The Price of Fear. The pages felt alive, each turn sparking static electricity that jolted her senses. Shadows danced hungrily around her, their claws stretching, drumming against the walls like impatient ghosts. The figure in the dark loomed close, eyes filled with twisted anticipation, the very embodiment of her escalating dread. Every story has a cost, it whispered, an oily tone slithering through the trembling air. Sacrifice is required. She felt the weight of its words, heavy like a lead ball in her stomach. Glancing around, she spotted the journals on the shelves, all whispering their terrible truths. The dread clawed deeper. She focused again on the book in her hands. With a deep breath, she opened it fully, determined to understand. The narratives within spilled out, vivid and cruel. Fragments of the past flickered like a wicked film reel. She was pulled into visions of mournful faces, each one reflecting a twisted offshoot of her own fears: loss, betrayal, abandonment. The author hadn't just documented horror, they had embedded fear into every line. The shadows crept closer as if drawn to her despair. Will you trust your fears? A voice beckoned from the depths. Jessica clenched her jaw. Trust? What would she trust? The memories clawing at her mind, or the darkness that wanted to consume her completely? She pressed on, reading a chilling passage about a cursed soul who had faced the shadows only to succumb to them. A wave of anxiety washed over her, cold like ice water. No! I want to let it happen. She shouted, her voice reverberating off the walls, echoing through the now quiet library. The figure chuckled, its laughter a backdrop of sinister delight. You think you can break the cycle? You're already entangled in it. Face it like they did. The howling shadows paused, almost expectantly, as if waiting for the judgment to fall upon her. Jessica felt the room stifle, air heavy and stagnant. No, I am stronger, she declared, though doubt crept beneath her skin. The intensity surged. The shadows on the walls pulsed, each flickering light seeming to reflect the fear in her heart. A low hum filled the air, a chant of the damned surrounding her. Join us. Join us. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of movement in her peripheral vision. Behind her, a figure began taking shape from the darkness, forming into a grotesque parody of herself, its hollow eyes radiating an emptiness that ignited panic. You can't escape, it whispered, its voice chilling, each syllable wrapping tightly around her limbs. Panic washed over her mind like a furious tide. Shut up! Jessica screamed, willing herself to fight. A wild instinct surged within her. She turned back to the journal, desperate to find a way out. Flipping through pages, one passage seized her attention. To confront fear is to find its purpose. Only through acceptance can the cycle be broken. Was this it? Her chance? Her hands shook as she read the words. Acceptance. The figure clutched its chest, laughter leaking into sobs. Welcome to your end, Jessica. It screeched. She could feel the shadows closing in like a noose. In a moment of wild determination, she shouted, I accept my fear. White-hot pain shot through her, enveloping her senses. A blaze of fire and ice danced sharply at the edges of her consciousness, tossing her thoughts into a whirlpool. The shadows recoiled momentarily. Then they lunged, snapping and clawing, ready to drag her down. She needed just a moment longer. What lay at the heart of her fear? Show me. She cried, and the shadows paused as if considering her. Would they reveal the hidden darkness? Was this the moment she would either break free or be swept away? As darkness swirled around her, thick with anticipation, an answer lurked just out of reach. Would she find the dreaded truth within herself, or was she destined to become yet another lost soul in the library's haunting tale? The realization settled in, a violent tremor coursing through her. Jessica braced for the storm that would come, for the crossroads hidden in shadows. The shadows hesitated, a crack of silence slicing through the chaos as if the very fabric of fear held its breath. Jessica felt their weight, a collective gaze pressing into her skin. The unbearable darkness morphed around her, folding in tighter. What lay ahead lurked in her own heart, veiled, waiting. Now you wish to know the truth. The voice coiled around her like snake venom. It slithered into her ears, chilling her resolve. Do you dare? Yes. She barked, feeling the fire within flare once more. This was it. A moment of fragile strength had been summoned from her deepest recesses, and she would not let it dissipate. The figure still loomed, twisted and cruel, but its hollow laughter fell silent, anticipation crackling, the shadows paused, and a peculiar glow emanated from the pages of the journal. Jessica felt her heart leap, a churning storm of hope and fear wrestled within. The very air pulsed with energy, thick with unspoken revelations. She pressed her fingertip onto the script, tracing the letters, rekindling focus. Fear loves to hide the deepest truths, the voice crooned, tauntingly slow. But to face them can awaken the dead. The words triggered something deep inside, memories she tightly sealed. A scarred childhood of abandonment, the howling void of loneliness, the fear of never being enough. They swirled into existence. Images cascaded rapidly, a deluge unveiling famished lives snatched by the shadows. Each one a reflection of her own fears, each face a warning. She saw herself stepping into the world, the eager child, trembling with wide eyes, driven by a yearning for acceptance. And then, the inevitable dark figure lurking nearby, a monstrous thing that feasted on hesitation, transforming her desires into chains. No. She whimpered, shaking her head against the vivid onslaught. But the images held fast. They wrapped tightly around her brain, constricting like a vice. Accept them. Came the rasp, its tone blending mockery with insidious delight. Ribbons of shadow writhed around her limbs, anchoring her to these memories. Each shard of truth cut deeper than the last. Jessica felt her finger pulse against the text. The journal glowed brighter, urging her on as if whispering the ancient secrets tucked between the lines. She had faced fear but had never embraced it. Was acceptance truly the key? Join us. The voices clamored, a cacophony rising in frenzy, eager to pull her into their depths, to drown her in despair. No. She cried, newfound urgency propelling her forward. I refuse to live in your grip. I will not be just another story to tell. With shaking resolve, she leaped toward the heart of the journal, prepared to wrestle with her darkest truths. Then, silence fell. The likeness of herself in the shadows blinked, eyes narrowing. You cannot reconcile what you do not know. What if your acceptance leads to ruin? It challenged, its voice a chilling caress. With a trembling breath, Jessica faced it squarely. Then ruin it is. But ruin is not the end. I will rise from the ashes. The shadows trembled, as if debating the weight of her words. Let us see, the voice hissed, excitement threading through its menace. But no, every truth you unearth holds a consequence. In a sudden rush, the shadows surged at her, an overwhelming tide, ready to drag her under. Each one whispered terrifying secrets desperate to crush her spirit. Clawing, biting, they clawed at her mind, flooding her senses with all the fears she'd kept at bay. But beneath the swell of darkness, a spark ignited. She pressed onward into the heart of the book, the light meeting the encroaching shadows. What was it that haunted her? What sacrifice awaited her at the end of this journey? The ground trembled, raw energy crackling in the air. Jessica saw flashes of the past flickering like an old film reel, her family's scarred history unveiled, buried secrets clawing for life. Memories that threatened to swallow her hold. In this storm of revelations, one truth echoed louder than the others. Fear was not merely an enemy to conquer. It was something more insidious, a link to her very essence. A deafening silence fell. Then, the figure staggered back, disoriented. What would happen if Jessica broke the cycle? The shadows hesitated, gathering, swirling in confusion, yet, lurking in that uncertainty lay a chilling question: could she handle whatever darkness was about to be revealed? Jessica took a step forward, heart pounding. With a breath like steel, she whispered, "Show me." What would she uncover in the depths of her own heart? What dark truth awaited her from the shadows within? Jessica stood at the precipice of her fears, surrounded by the darkness that had followed her relentlessly. The journal's pages glimmered with the weight of lost souls, their narratives crisscrossed in a tangled web, and each story held a part of her. She felt it in her bones. The warped figures around her shifted like shadows in her peripheral vision, beckoning her with their haunting cries. "This is your moment, Jessica," the distorted reflection of herself hissed, slinking closer. "Why fight? You could be one of us." "No," she cried, a surge of defiance igniting in her chest. "I want to be lost to your darkness." With every step she took towards the ethereal glow of the journal, the air crackled with energy. Memories whirred around her like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind, each one more vivid than the last. A childhood spent cowering in corners, echoing with rejection. She saw herself, trembling and scared, that familiar, chilling figure lurking just outside her perception, fueling her insecurities. She gritted her teeth, forming a fist around the truth she'd shoved into the depths whenever fear crept to the surface. Jessica lifted her chin, pushing past the memories that sought to cripple her resolve. "I accept my fear for what it is," she shouted into the chaos. The world around her froze. The shadows paused, whispering amongst themselves, uncertainty creeping into their fibers. "You think you have power over us?" The figure echoed, cracking laughter laced with malice. "I do," she shot back, her voice rising like a storm. "By confronting my past, I break the cycle. I am not my fear. I am more." The glow of the journal flared to life, illuminating the library with blinding radiance. Jessica felt the strength of those lost souls pulse through her, each one poised on the precipice of release. The shadows recoiled, their forms shifting, unable to withstand the rush of light. "Your acceptance means nothing," the voice shrieked, a hint of fear trembling beneath its bravado. "Then let me show you what it means," she cried, her heart pounding in her ears. With a fierce determination, she threw the journal open wide, letting the past flood into her. Each story collided with her, breaking the barriers she'd hidden behind. Pain, sorrow, and fear surged and coalesced into a force she hadn't anticipated. Reality twisted, promising both torment and liberation. "Let it in." The shadowed reflections howled, rallying, desperate to reclaim their hold. But the surge of light coursing through her began to break through, unraveling the darkness woven into each tale. "I own this pain," Jessica roared, exploding forward into the storm of swirling memories, the childhood she yearned to reclaim, the moments lost to despair. As she plunged into that chaotic swirl, the light felt heavier, revealing a tapestry of her very being, intersecting paths of grief but illuminated by moments of strength. The shadows melted away in the wake of acceptance, their cries fading into silence. Jessica felt the weight of their absence, an emptiness filled with tremendous relief. It was as if each name etched upon the walls of dread was set free, liberated by the truth she had unearthed. When everything fell quiet, Jessica opened her eyes, standing alone in a vast white space that glimmered with possibility. The journal had vanished, but its pulse lingered in the air, a promise of freedom rather than imprisonment. No longer bound by the chains of her fears, she could forge her path, reclaiming the narrative that belonged to her. Taking a deep, revitalizing breath, she felt light. The oppressive weight that had pressed against her for so long had dissolved, leaving only the distant echoes of her past. She smiled, the potential blooming within her like a flower breaking through the frost. With each step forward, she felt more free. "I will share this truth," Jessica vowed into the emptiness, allowing her voice to resonate through the expanse. To face fear is to own your story, to rise from the ashes. The absence of shadows cradled her, whispering tales of the lost. Tenaciously, she held on to her resolve, followed by a knowing that the dark might beckon again, but she would be ready, not a victim, but a fighter. The cycle had been broken. As she walked towards the infinite possibilities ahead, she wouldn't guard her fears but embrace them. She wouldn't be trapped by the past. Instead, she would illuminate her future, with a spark in her heart and the whispers of countless souls guiding her. Jessica stepped into the light, ready to reclaim her true story. Now, before we wrap up, I have an urgent request for you. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now. Do it to feed the algorithm and help others find this tale. And I want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Help us spread the light and connect with others who crave these stories. Thank you for being on this incredible journey with me.